Okay, so more people may join, but let's just go ahead and get started. We already have a pretty good group. So, my name is Anika Manzoor. I'm the executive director of the Youth Activism Project, a nonprofit based in Washington, D.C., that helps young people discover the power of their voice through policy advocacy and community organizing. And I'm so excited to share with you all a skill that has been a staple in my trainings with young people called public narrative, which is a leadership and communication practice that's essential for movement building. And so just to give you a quick lay of the land for today, I'm going to introduce the public narrative framework, and then we're going to spend the bulk of today understanding story of self, which is the first part of the framework. We're going to have some time practicing it, and then we're also going to debrief. We're going to end with some debriefs and final thoughts. And so this skill builder is going to be really fast paced. I'm going to cover a lot of ground in a short amount of time. So I really encourage everyone to go ahead and put things in the chat whenever you have a thought that you'd like to share. And we're also going to have some time where people are going to share on mic as well. And if folks can put their cameras on if they feel comfortable, that'll be greatly appreciated. So diving right into public narrative essentially mobilizes people into action. When you think about what prevents people from going into action, there's a set of what I like to call action inhibitors, such as inertia, apathy, fear, isolation, and self-doubt. And what really overcomes these action inhibitors are what I like to call action motivators. And so we have urgency, which is what you need to overcome inertia. Anger is what overcomes apathy. Hope is what overcomes fear. Solidarity is what overcomes isolation, and a sense of self-empowerment is what overcomes self-doubt. And public narrative is something that leverages all of these action motivators by really rooting in values and then using emotion to convey values and connect with other people in order to mobilize them into action. And the public narrative typically starts with the story of self. This is your leadership or activism origin story. If we have any comic book or superhero fans in the crowd today, you often hear about the superhero origin story. That's the kind of mindset I want you all to think about yourself. You are all superheroes in this collective experience that we're having called life, where we're up against these immense challenges like climate change, racial injustice, gender rights, and these are all things, and I'm sure you all have different issues that you focus on as well. You are all the heroes of your story. And so with the story of self, you can convey that story to others to really be a model for others to join you in solidarity. And the story of self typically begins with the question, what calls you to leadership? And so now is an opportunity for us to do a little bit of back and forth with someone in the audience. So is someone willing to discover what their leadership or activism origin story is with me today? You can raise your hand, or you can hop off of mute. Anything works. And Linda, if you could put 5 minutes on the clock, that'd be great. All right. I know it might be a little bit maybe early for some folks, but yeah, is there anyone? I can also call on someone and see if you might be willing. Pia, are you there? Can you hop off of mute?
Hi, yes, I am. How are you?
I'm good, Pia. Are you willing to go through this exercise with me to discover your story of self?
I would be happy to. I am working at IYF, so as long as you're happy to have an IYF team member share, I'd be more than happy to.
I love that. So and then I'll tell you, Pia, as we go through this, I'm going to ask you a series of questions. If I interrupt you, don't take it personally. It's just to get to the kind of crux of the content. So let's start off. What calls you to leadership?
I think wanting to work with others and also work to empower others calls me to leadership.
And when was the first time you feel like you desired that?
Oh goodness, I was young, a child, I think. I think I had a lot of opportunities when I was in school to participate in student governing bodies, even as early as elementary school.
So yeah, can you describe me, like, what grade were you? What was this opportunity? When did you first find out that you could engage in these kinds of opportunities?
I was probably in second or third grade, and then as a fourth grader in elementary school, so around
Third
age
grade. So where were you when you first like discovered this opportunity? Were you in class?
in, I don't distinctly remember, but I would say it was in my public school setting.
And what are any details that you might remember about that for those first experiences in the second and third grade?
Feeling excited about being able to work with others to make decisions and to chart a direction.
And why were you so excited about that? Where do you feel like that excitement came from?
Being part of something. Being part of something is very alluring and exciting and meaningful to me.
And where did you learn that? Like, did you learn that in school? Did you learn that from your parents? Like, why was that so alluring? There's some people that like they don't really care. They're gonna do their thing and not want to be a part of something. So what made you different in that sense?
Oh, I don't know if it's different, and maybe it's a natural feeling that is exciting and meaningful to participate in community and sort of charting the path for the group around me, including myself.
And so when was the first time you felt like you've had that experience of like being involved in something and thinking like I want to have this again?
Well, definitely being part of the student council when I was in elementary school is an early memory
Even
of that.
before, even before that. So, you remember being excited because you wanted to be a part of something, but you must have known that like that feeling you had that experience even before. So where have you had that experience?
I guess in my home with my siblings and my parents.
And so what was your family like? What were your parents like? What were your siblings like?
So my mom is a very strong, independent woman. I have an older sister who's also strong and independent, and a brother who is younger than me and very creative.
And then how do you think that influenced you in your upbringing?
We had to all take a lot of responsibility and pitch in. So it was very much a teamwork effort within our family in the home.
And okay, so you learn that teamwork and the benefits that come out of that in family, and that to me it seems like it relates to that first moment in the second grade where you learned about this opportunity to engage in bettering your environment, and you're like, I want to keep doing that. Is that correct? Is that
I,
accurate?
I think that's a great analysis.
And so I'll stop right there because we are running out of time. But I really I love this image of you being in the second grade, being super excited after these values that you've learned in your family. As we go through this, I really want to encourage you to really dig deep in that time and think about where you might have been and what are those details in that leadership journey for you. And then also think about the first time you might have experienced some sort of challenge in that kind of, so you engage in leadership, and when was the first time you had any sort of challenge to your values in those early moments in your life? Okay, so now thank you so much, Pia. Let's give some snaps for Pia. We're gonna do a bit of debrief, and so either in the chat or you can also go off of mute. What did you notice me doing? And Linda, if you could do 4 minutes on the clock, thanks. Yeah. Did anyone notice what kind of questions was I asking? Or perhaps we can start with Pia. I mean, Pia, how did that feel for you?
Well, some of the questions I think felt really good because you were going deeper and exploring and pushing me to something else. And some of the questions made me feel like, well, I'm not giving her the answer that she's really looking for.
And is that, I mean, that's totally fine, right? That's why we ask questions, right?
Yeah.
But did you feel like I was grilling you? Like, did you feel uncomfortable?
Not really.
Okay.
Maybe a little bit, but not really.
It is nerve-wracking to kind of go
Yes.
like that.
Yes.
And do
Yeah.
you feel like you discovered something new about your kind of personal journey?
I think maybe drawing back this desire that I have to my values and family life and family experience is a nice perspective to consider.
Oops, sorry about that. Um, all right, so we have a quiet crowd today. Is there anyone who's willing to share their any insights that they might have in terms of like how I was asking those questions, what I was looking into, or just any general insights? Let's not be shy here. And if folks can put on their camera, that'll be really great. I think that's gonna facilitate that sense of maybe solidarity and teamwork, like Pia was talking about in her story. All right, we have something in the chat. So I asked a lot of open-ended questions, right? I asked also what a lot of people consider probing questions. Robin, would you mind hopping off of mute and expanding a little bit more on your analysis or anything else you might have noticed?
Look, I just want to point out it's 2 o'clock in the morning here, so I'm just hanging in there, just listening. No, I just enjoying the way that you're holding space, and I just felt that the questions you're asking were open-ended, which allowed her to explain more about herself, and then you could pick up little bits and pieces out of that answer that you could open again. So if anything, I'd call it a series of nested loops. You were just sort of looking to open it, and at the end of it, I gather you would close them all back up. So it was a nice round little conversation.
I love that nested loops. That's a really a new way of thinking about it that I haven't explored before. Thank you so much, Robin, and thank you for everyone who's coming here. It's probably like a really strange time, and I really appreciate you all making that time today. So any last thoughts on maybe perhaps kind of what you think I was trying? You know, Pia talked about how I was trying to get certain answers. What were those certain answers that you saw me going towards? Any thoughts? Christina, you're asking or saying that it's sort of like peeling back an onion, right? You know, we all have these layers that I think the story of self-practice can really allow us to kind of dig into and figure out. You know, we do what we do, but sometimes we don't know why we do it, right? And so that's kind of what I was getting at, the origin moment of our leadership. And I don't know if I'm saying your name right. Tope or Tape, do you mind? It felt like I gave her the answers. Can you explain that a little bit? You can unmute yourself. Okay. All right, we'll just move on. So one thing that I want to really emphasize in terms of like what I was really getting at was the story of Pia's kind of childhood experiences that ultimately led her to leadership. And we focus on childhood because that's where you really that's where you learn your values, right? And these are the values that you take with you until for the rest of your lives. And what I was also really trying to get at were story moments in Pia's life. That's why I was asking her, okay, I really want you to think about, where you might have been, what that whole scenario was like, because there's a whole body of research that shows how narratives is what allows people to connect with one another. And you all might be, this is intuitive. A lot of us come from traditions where oral history is a deep part of our traditions, and that's really where this kind of comes from. And so as we think about a story structure, the general framework that we use in public narrative is the challenge, choice, outcome framework. In any good plot, you don't just have the protagonist kind of going through the story and nothing bad really happening, right? That would make a really, really boring story. You really need some sort of conflict that challenges that character's values, that compels them to make a choice and yield some sort of outcome. So as this relates to public narrative, every story of self has to have that challenge that the protagonists face that compels them to make this choice. And this choice is a moral choice, right? That serves as a model for others. And then you really want to be explicit about the outcome, because the outcome is where you have hope. And that hope is what you need to combat those action inhibitors that we were talking about earlier. finally, you want to make it very clear where the protagonist gets their values. That's why I was asking all those questions about Pia's values. And then in the end, you really want to focus on imagery, or throughout the story, you want to focus on imagery because it's those sights, sounds, etc., that really bring the audience to that moment with you. So now we're going to start our practice. I want you to think about what are the life experiences that have shaped your values that call you to leadership. And you can start with where you are right now. What do you do either in terms of your career or hobby that is all about leadership, all about mobilizing others into action? And then think about, when was the first time you had leadership experience, you know? Also, where do you get those values from your parents or your teachers, role models, anything like that? A lot of times we have these experiences in school. So think about that chronology. Start with now and then kind of go back in time and think about pivotal moments in your childhood where you experienced a challenge. You had to make a choice that was guided by a moral value. And then there's like an outcome, right? What was that outcome? And how did that ultimately lead you to where you are today? So we're going to do 5 minutes on the clock to do this. And then if folks have any questions, please put it in the chat and I will answer it in the chat so we can keep quiet for other folks who want to concentrate. So 5 minutes, Linda. Okay, I know that wasn't fully 5 minutes, but for the sake of time, I think we're just going to go ahead and continue. And if folks still want to, while we're listening, if they might have some ideas they want to jot down for their own story, that works too. So was that Amandi who said that he'd like to take a go? Is that your name?
Yeah, that's Amandi.
Okay, Amandi, thank you so much for being so eager to volunteer. So let's dive right into it. So the way this is going to work is Linda's going to put 2 minutes on the clock for you to share your story. And I want you to say it like a story. Don't just say like, I want to talk about X, Y, and Z, right? And then I'm going to do some coaching. And then for everyone who's throughout that entire process, please go ahead and start putting stuff in the chat. We're going to end with a debrief. So Linda, can you put 2 minutes? All right, Amandi, the floor is yours.
Okay, cool. Thanks so much for this wonderful session. So I'm tuning in from Kenya, to be honest. And let me start with what's a challenge I experienced. So growing up in a less fortunate community or a family that could not afford to pay my school fees made things a little bit tricky. So immediately I finished my primary school, that is class 8. My family did not have enough money to take me to high school. So I had 1 year, I had to spend 1 year before joining high school. And this was really hard. I had to visit my cousin or my aunt, working with them, doing some food sales and stuff like that. But then I felt when I was with the family or with the relatives, their plan was that they take me somewhere and learn how to make shoes, like a shoe mender, if you see what I mean. So this one I did spend with them a bit of time, say 7 months. And then when they decided that, Peter, we want to take you somewhere so you can learn how to make shoes, then I said, no, I got to go back to my parents and have a word with them and probably see if they can take me to school. So when I head back home, I used to be a scout. I was invited for a scout camp, and when I joined a scout camp, it was organized by the foreigners, as in the scouts in the UK. So when I joined, I was so lucky to secure a sponsor to take me to high school. So my dad in there said that take my son to technical training so he can learn something so that he can make money. My mom said that take my son to school. I went for a choice of going back to school. So after 1 year, I joined high school. And then I did manage to work extra hard. And then I secured a grade that took me to university. And as I speak now, I've worked in the UK, and now I run my charity organization helping young people that could not otherwise have believed that they can, to believe in themselves and make a difference. So that's my story, Anika.
Thank you so much. That's a beautiful, beautiful story. And Linda, could you put 2 minutes on the clock? I'm really eager to dive right in. I think there were so many wonderful aspects of your story. I loved how you really focused on all of these, the framework in the public narrative. You had a very explicit challenge. Your choice is very clear. The outcome was so inspiring. How you were eventually able to go to university, and now you have your own charity, which I think is absolutely incredible. I really want to focus on the value that guided your choice. And so I could really see in your story the value of education. That was really important to you. Can you explain to me why that was so important to you?
Okay, good question, Anita. So I've always, I was looking at the society and like, I'm the first person in my community or in my family to go to the university.
Right.
So the thing was, looking at a society where not so many are educated, it's like the blind, probably you might look at it. The
Okay,
blind
I'm going to interrupt you because, again, and don't take it personally, it's just so that we could stick with the framework. So you're saying, you live in a society where a lot of people don't have those opportunities. And you could have easily said, I don't need education. No one else really has education. But was there someone in your life? Was it your family? Did they really emphasize the value of education for you? Because I also saw that they were kind of taking you away from education. Is that right to say? Your family was focusing on, making shoes, the technical education. You're like, no, I want to go back to school. So where did that come from?
I think it's because of my mom.
Okay.
Probably my mom is not that educated, but probably just looking at her, probably she might have seen other people who are doing so well after getting educated. So I think my mom was.
Do you remember your mom ever telling you anything about the value of education early on?
I remember my mom saying, because this was a meeting, and my mom strictly said she's always a quiet lady, and how she spoke about the education part, I felt like I'll go with the choice of my mom, so I just felt from her, something like that.
Okay, I really love that because I think we're getting to the origin of your value. So I have to actually stop real quick, but I'm gonna wrap up. And you and I, we're gonna stay together. We're about to go into breakout rooms, but you and I will stay together. And I'm really gonna work with you on unearthing how exactly your mom influenced you there, because I think that's where the source of your value is. So So I'm going to just go right into kind of what I did. Let me just check the chat real quick to see if anyone said anything. So I'm going to kind of debrief what I did. And then if folks have any questions or comments, we can do that before we go into breakouts. So what I was really focusing on is this practice of coaching. And I have this checklist here that I want to kind of use to break down what I was doing. So when you're listening to a story of self, you really want to understand where the person's origin story is, where that origin point is. And with Amandi, he actually had that in his story. It was very clear to me that he wanted an education. And so I kind of went down this list. I saw that he had a challenge. I saw that he had a choice. And then I saw that in the value part, that's where he could have emphasize a little bit more where he got that value for education from, because where I was in his story, I didn't see anyone else really uplifting that for him. And so as you go into breakout rooms, your partner may not be able to go as further down the checklist. They might be stuck at the origin point, because that's often where I see people get stuck at. They'll say, they'll start the story with a leadership experience where they're already doing leadership. And I remember I was coaching someone, and their challenge was they were doing political canvassing. And I was like, hold up, let's back up. Why are you canvassing for a political candidate? Like, why do you even care, So another way to think about this, if the person is not answering the question of why they care, that's a great place to start. Like, where is that origin truly of why they care? And so as you may have noticed, if we go to the right side of the checklist, if you you really want to start off with what resonated with you in the story, and then you'll move into constructive feedback. But when you do the constructive feedback, make sure you're asking questions rather than making statements. And then interrupt if you feel like the person is not getting to that point, So interruption is key in terms of holding authority if you're the one that's coaching. And then try to focus the last 30 seconds on wrap up. And Linda, if you can make a note when you're going to do the time cues. So Linda will be, when you're in breakout rooms, she'll be sending the time cues. She'll be sending you when you need to switch. So we'll do 2 minutes for the first person to share their story. And that first person could be the last person who comes, could be the first person to share their story for the ease of going into it. So 2 minutes to share the story, 3 minutes for coaching, and then we switch. And then Linda will let you know when to start the story, when to start the coaching, and when to do the wrap up for each of those parts. So do you have any questions before we go into any questions or comments before we go into breakout rooms? All right, I'm hoping that means everyone's ready to go and share their story. So Linda, can you do the honor of putting us into breakout rooms? Love that. Thank you for sharing. And sorry, for folks who are just coming back, we were just wrapping up in our session where I was really pushing the participants in my group to really dig into the childhood. And Elidio was just sharing something from his childhood because he was focusing a lot on his adulthood. I'm like, no, we need to go back, right? These values come really, really early on. So we have only like 1 or 2 minutes. I'd love to hear in the chat, or if anyone wants to hop off of mute, how was that experience for you? How was it coaching? How was it sharing?
Hey, this is Matt. I was in a breakout room with Tope, and it was really interesting. Like, I think like a lot of discussions that require you to dig into your own personal baggage, it starts off a little slow because you're kind of thinking and discovering things as you're talking through. But we kind of like loosened up and got into the groove, and we actually started there were a couple of like little small like revelations that I think we had, and a couple of points that he made connected with a couple of points that I made towards the end. So ultimately, I think it was an interesting experience that started off, a little bit like pulling teeth, but ending up being like a good conversation.
That's awesome. I love that. I'm gonna quickly, I know we have like 1 more minute. I would have loved a larger debrief, but if folks want to just quickly put some stuff in the chat, please go ahead and do that. I wanted to quickly talk about what the full public narrative experience looks like. In addition to the story of self, we also have a story of us, which is what are collective challenges that we as a community have faced and have overcome as a community. And the story of now is like, what are the issues in your community, or what are the issues globally that you want to solve? And when we go deeper into this framework, you'll see how all of these are connected. So the story of self is just the entry point, but you need the story of us and the story of now to really communicate the urgency to act. And so if this is something that folks are interested in, Linda, I think, is gonna put a survey in the slide. I also just realized I didn't have I forgot to put what organization people are with. So if you can put that in the additional comment section, that'd be really great. If this is something you want to stay in touch with me about, please fill out the survey and I'll follow up with you. Thank you so much for your time. I don't know if we're allowed to stay in case folks have anything additional to share, but I will be around if that's possible. So thank you so much, everyone.